Over on my application, Big Sexy Poems, I have a bunch of data grids like this. Most applications have something to this effect, where I have a row, and this row typically has some sort of a primary link. This is the primary call to action if I want to view a detail page. I'll also have some additional text-only data. Maybe I have a secondary link, and then sometimes I have a couple of calls to action. And what I've been trying to do is include an Alpine.js directive that makes the entire row in this table clickable. Now there's some nuance to this, and there's a lot of decision making that involves trade-offs that I've made. So if I click into a cell that has no link, what I'm doing is activating this primary link in the row, and you can see that I executed the auto clicking of the row linker. If we look at the element here, you'll see that it has a isRowLinker CSS class. And so when I click in this text only link, what it's doing is it's looking for that row linker and it's activating it programmatically. And you can see here up in the URL that the href is changing based on which link gets activated. And then I'm just using some JavaScript to add a class to that, so you can see which link is actually being activated. Now, it doesn't always click the row linker. If you click into a cell that has another link, you'll see that I'm actually activating that link instead of the row linker. So I'm attempting to balance the usability of the primary link against all of the other links that might exist. Now, if I click into a cell that has multiple actions in it, you'll see down here that I'm actually ignoring that, because what I've decided is that because there's multiple links, if the user misclicks, it's going to be too hard for me to determine which link they actually intended to do, meaning did they intend for the row linker behavior to take place, or did they actually mean to click on one of these and then just misclicked ever so slightly. So again, adding a clickability to the row is just not as easy as it might sound at first once you start to consider all of the various nuances. So for example, if I click and I highlight text, that's a mouse down, drag, and then a mouse up event, and that'll actually fire as a click event. But I don't want to navigate if there's a selection done, because the user probably wants to come in and hit some sort of a copy action here. So again, lots of nuance. Let's just take a quick look at how this is working under the hood. Your decisions may very well differ from my decisions, so I'll just run through. Again, there is this concept of a row linker, and that's going to be the thing that is searched for and fired if you click into a TD element, a table cell that has no link associated with it. So I'm listening on the click event on the table. So actually, if we jump back up here, what you'll notice is that the Alpine directive is actually applied to the table itself. So I'm doing event delegation instead of binding to every single possible TD or row. And because of that, again, there's just always a bunch of trade-offs. In this case, I've decided to listen for the click event as opposed to something like the mouse down event. When I first implemented this, I had this as a mouse down, and what that made the interactions feel is quite a bit snappier, because it's like I was anticipating what the user wanted to do. The problem is when they went to highlight text, that would also trigger that mouse down event, and I didn't have an opportunity to see if they were doing something other than clicking on a link. So trading off some snappiness for some integrity and fidelity, I had to move from the mouse down to the click event. And then the bulk of this is all inside this mouse handler. And I'm not going to go into it in too much detail because you can look in the blog post, but essentially I'm ignoring untrusted events. Those are events that are fired programmatically. I'm ignoring events that are triggered from non-primary buttons on the mouse. So right clicking, technically I think triggers a click event, but I don't want to trigger a navigation from a right click event. If something else has already intercepted that event, because remember, I'm doing event delegation, so there's a whole world that exists between the original click and then where I intercepted at the table level. And if anything else has jumped in and prevented that default, I'm going to say, you know what, you're probably dealing with a lower level workflow. I'm not going to get involved. If there is no TD, so if I were to click, for example, into the header, You can see here that I'm clicking outside of a TD, so I'm going to ignore that. If you click on an actionable element, so if you click on something like a link or a button already, then there's going to be a natural behavior and I don't want to get involved. Again, we can see that here. If I click directly on the link, the target is an actionable element, so I'm ignoring that. If there's a selection that has not been collapsed, so if the start and the end of the selection are not the same value, then I'm going to consider a selection existing. This is very coarse-grained, meaning this could be anywhere in the document, but for my purposes, this is pretty meaningful. So you'll see here, if I highlight and that leads to a click, I'm ignoring that because a selection's detected. Continuing on, if you click in a cell and there's only a single link and there's no other actionable element, then I'm going to execute the click on that link. And that's what we're seeing here. If you click into a cell that has a single link, you can see auto clicking an isolated link. All right, so that's what we're doing there. If there are multiple elements, I'm ignoring it. And we can see that if you click somewhere here into the actions, you can see multiple misclick targets available. So I'm not going to make any decisions about what you intended to do because there's some fuzziness here in what was possible. If we jump back, if all else fails, I then look for that row linker, any link with that is row linker class. And if there is no row linker element, then I'm going to ignore. I don't have a demo of that because the whole point is to trigger that link. And then ultimately, if I do have the row linker and nothing else has exited early from this handler, I will programmatically click that link. And we can see that here. If I click into the text only field, that I'm now auto clicking the row linker. And you can see again, that's what that would fired there. So obviously non-trivial here, this idea of activating a row. At first it sounds, oh, this is going to be super simple, but it is actually very far from super simple. And it's a bunch of trade-offs. Your decisions on how you would implement this are probably going to be different from how I implemented it. And I don't think there is one path forward. So, but right now this seems to be working out pretty well for me on my Big Sexy Poems app. And curious to hear if anyone else has strong feelings one way or the other.